Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey now, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're going to be taking a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter as we speak. That game is called Centauri Saga and is from the company Vesuvius Media. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this paid preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page. I'm going to have the link down in the description section underneath this video, and then also there will be a card link up in the top corner of your screen. Just click on it, it'll pull it down, you'll see the link to the project. Go there, find out even more information than I could possibly tell you here, as well as other videos and different rules descriptions, things like that, and hopefully you'll consider backing the project once you see the full grand scope of it. Now, Centauri Saga is a 4X cooperative game. At least it can be cooperative with some of the scenarios in the box. It can also be player versus player as well, and there's many other different types of campaign scenarios on the horizon too, so lots of different options for you to play this game. But essentially what's happening is that in the world of Centauri Saga, you and your compatriots, if assuming you're doing the cooperative mode, are working together with your armadas, these fleets of ships that you're trying to get rid of raiders and explore the galaxy and build star bases and just protect your corner of the galaxy. You have different ways to customize your ship, lots of different units and fleet ships and things that you can do to upgrade your armada, as well as trying to survive events and destroy raiders and boss raiders and all types of different things. It's a game that is both simple to learn, but at the same time very expansive. So let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played and what you can expect. And I will let you know now that there was an error in getting me the correct play mats for this overview in time to meet the deadline before the Kickstarter is going to expire. So you're not going to see the play mats for the different players in this overview, and they are a pretty important part of the game. But I still went ahead and give you just a general overview of what you can expect from the different phases of the game, and then I'm going to flash a picture of the play mats as well. So I would encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page to find out even more information about those, but hopefully this will give you just a taste of what the game is like so you can get a good idea of it. Then after that, we're going to come back. I'll give you my final thoughts. Alright, I'm going to give you a very brief look at Centauri Saga. This is a game that is usually cooperative, but it depends on the scenario that you play as. There's actually a player versus player scenario, but the one that I'm going to mostly talk about today is just going to be the cooperative scenario. I do want to reiterate, as I mentioned right before we got into this overview, that for certain reasons I don't have the playmats that are usually with the game, so we're just going to kind of work around that, and I'll show you some of the other aspects of the game. Now, at the beginning of the game, each player is going to have a commander card that they're going to choose or randomly distribute to each other and put in front of them. There's actually 2 different commander cards for each type of commander with a different type of bonus, so you choose the one that appeals to you the most. So, for instance, James Avery here says that combat for the Armada and speed are +1 and research lab, and his special ability is to reduce damage taken by 1, but some of the other commanders will have different types of special abilities like rerolls and things like that. Now, together with that, Captain, you are also going to get an Armada token, which is a miniature representing your fleet. And then together with that, and these are like the starting hexes that you're going to put out, these sectors. With that, you're going to have, and remember, normally on a playmat, the different parts of your Armada. These are actually like special power-ups and units which you will use to influence your Armada, increase its shields, combat speed, and so on and so forth. Now, as I mentioned, there are going to be different scenarios in the game. So, for instance, the one that we're using today is as if it's for a 4-player setup and fixing the jump gate. Each player will also have a little cheat sheet card that will tell you how the different phases of the game are going to work. And as you can see, there are many different types of cards in the game, ranging from event cards and radar cards. We're going to get to all of those. I think the most efficient way to probably tell you how the game is going to work is just to take you through the different phases of the game. First up, you have the events phase. Now, a couple of things here are not necessarily going to happen all the time, like resolving any kind of events that may pop out. Events are a special type of card that may come out for a variety of different reasons, or also retaliation from Ravagers and Raiders and all the different types of enemies that come out on the board. These things may or may not happen at the start of your turn, and we'll get to how those are resolved in a little bit. But then you have the scanning report. This is where you're actually going to draw one of the radar cards and resolve what it says. Now, on these cards, the top part part of the card, it does two different things. The top part of the card determines when XPM is going to come out, which for the purposes of this prototype are these things here. This is like a special type of alien material that you need to activate certain types of powers and goods. And in fact, for this scenario, fixing the jump gate, you need to bring XPM back to the jump gate, which is where all of the players start their Armada tokens on. And what happens here is that on the top half of this card, you have two different types of sectors that are depicted. Now, each type of sector, every sector in the game is going to have some sort of numbered box or cube or circle or something on it with a number in it. Now, the number for this purpose is irrelevant, but what you're trying to do here is if you have a sector with the sector type and that particular color and shape on it, then you would spawn an XPM there. If not on this one, then you would go over to the second choice instead. If you don't have either of those things, then you put out more sector tokens. The first player will do so. Whenever you put out a new sector, you're going to make sure that it lines up with two other sector hexes that are already out on the board. The other thing you would do is spawn raiders. And remember that in the final version of the game, there will actually be raider miniatures. But again, you're looking at the different symbol on the card and trying to match that up with the symbols on different sectors. If that is not the case, if there are no sectors that match that symbol, you skip this step. Now, next up is the upkeep phase. And the upkeep phase allows you to do two different things. First off, if you have activation tokens that have been used, then you can reset those. Activation tokens are going to be used for certain cards that have any kind of special power-up or ability that have a finite use per turn. And you'll use activation tokens to denote when you've used those. So when you get to the upkeep phase of a new round, then you're going to be able to reset those activation tokens. The other thing you can do is use your Astardium. Astardium are going to be represented, at least in this prototype of the game, by these little gems here. Astardium is a different type of resource similar to XPM in the sense that you can use that to upgrade your different abilities. The Astardium is actually marked on each of the different cards here, so anytime you see this symbol, that refers to Astardium. And so this is your opportunity to spend that Astardium to make your Armada better if you want to. Next up is the movement phase. This is where each of the players get to move their Armada. And one thing I should definitely make clear, in case I didn't already, is that while it looks like you have a miniature that is one ship, that is supposed to represent your entire Armada, which is going to be based strictly on the Armada cards that you have. So it could represent a tremendous amount, or just some really powerful warships and land troopers and things like that. This is just a token representing that thematically. So what it means during the movement phase is that you get to move whatever your speed is. So you look at all the Armada cards and special abilities and power-ups that you have and see what your speed is, and you get to move that many spaces. Now you can move along existing sectors if you want, but you also have the opportunity to explore if you want to. If you explore, you simply take the top sector off of the stack and then line it up so that it is touching two different tiles, just like so. So you can't leave it hanging out here like this, and you can't leave it hanging out in the middle of nowhere. It has to abut two other different types of tiles. Now, once you do that, it's going to cost you a point of your movement. It doesn't cost you an extra movement. The mere act of moving onto it costs you a movement, and then your movement phase is over, and you have to draw an exploration card, which we're going to get to. An encounter card, which we're going to get to in a moment. Now, it's possible that when you get onto one of these tiles or sectors, you're going to have to encounter raiders, and then when you try to move away from those raiders, that's going to cost you as well. You need to try and evade them. You have to spend an amount of movement equal to whatever the level of that raider is. I'll also point out here that the little legend key card that each player has, a little cheat sheet card as I like to call them, will say on one side of the card what the different raiders specs are depending on their level. So definitely something useful to keep in mind, and also the rewards for destroying them. Oh, one last thing during the movement phase. If there is XPM out on the board, you can spend a movement point in order to pick it up and put it with the rest of your Armada, although you can only have one at a time due to the unstable nature of XPM. Now, the next phase, as I had mentioned before, is the encounter phase. Now, there's a couple different things that might happen here. If, as I just mentioned, you are exploring a new sector, then you have to have an encounter. If not, you may be having combat with enemies that are already in the current sector, or you may choose to regroup, which I'll get to in a second. But let's say that you are actually having an encounter. Encounters are the deck of cards here that has like the satellite dish on them. So what you're going to do, these are going to be shuffled up. You're going to draw the top card off of the encounter deck, and on that card there's going to be two different options. And this is going to depend entirely upon whether you are in a safe zone or a dangerous zone, sector, I should say. So depending on that, whether you're in a safe or dangerous zone or sector, you're going to have to make either the easy or the tough option here. There'll be a little story blurb on the top describing what you're actually doing. This is the urgent repairs card. And then you have to make a test. So let's say that it's the easy one, which is combat of 1. And then over here it tells you what rewards you get for actually doing this, like a stardium and such. So let's say that you have to make that easy test. In this case, you have to look at whatever your combat is. So you add up all the combat stats you have for all of your power-ups and for your fleet, and then you're going to roll that many dice. The game will come with dice, and try to get, in this case, 1 success. That's the number in parentheses. Now, if it was the hard test, you would have to test your speed, however many, whatever number your speed is, you'd roll that many dice, and then you would have to get 3 successes. So that is significantly more difficult. And in this game, any number 4 through 6 is considered a success. So if you succeed on this test, you're going to get whatever the reward is on the level that you're at for this card. If you fail, unfortunately, you have to take 2 hull damage, and you have to draw the top card from the event deck, which are these smaller cards here, and put it into play. So for instance, this one says ambush, which is that you're going to spawn X raiders, and X equals the number of players. But for instance, it might also be sabotage. You take a hull damage. Each player takes a hull damage. Or this one is gun overload. Combat. You test combat 3 or take 2 hull damage. So these can be very bad. So you really do not want to fail these encounter checks. Now, alternatively, if someone is not involved in an encounter, then on their turn it might be that they're involved in combat with an enemy unit that is already out in one of the sectors. Now, this is very similar to resolving a test in that you're going to check your combat rating and roll a number of dice equal to your combat rating and try to get successes against your opponent and deal damage to them based on the successes that they've garnered. And then your opponent gets to do the same thing against you, trying to get a number of successes and use that to inflict damage upon you, which you can cancel out with your shields. But if they're not able to cancel out all the damage, then you're going to start taking hull damage instead. And I'm sorry, just to be clear, the enemies will have a static attack attribute depending on the type of enemy that it is, and they're just going to inflict that upon you. You have to roll your shields and try to get successes and use those shields to cancel out that attack damage. But if you're reduced to 0, you're destroyed. So you definitely do hull damage. I mean, if you're reduced to 0 hull, so you definitely do not want that to happen. But one way or the other, combat is going to continue until either one or the other opponent is destroyed. Now, if more than one armada of the players is in a sector engaging the enemy, you do not resolve it all at once. Players still take their turns in order. Now, barring all that, the other thing you can choose to do is simply to regroup. This is where you can take a breather and rebuild your defenses in one of several ways. The first thing you can try and do is draw a common action card. There's common action cards and there are special action cards, and they will all give you different special abilities to use when they apply. So, for instance, here you have the Hyperdrive. The Hyperdrive is a movement card, so when you would move, you're going to gain +2 movement points should you choose to use that card. Whereas you have Evasive Maneuver, which is an instant card, which means it can interrupt actions, and this one says you can cancel the effect of an event for this round. Now, see, event comes out, play this card, boom, you're good to go. The Cloaking Device, which is another movement card, which probably does what you think is obvious there. Other types of cards you might run into are things like R&D, which is an upkeep card. You increase your star port by 1. Or another instant card, Force Field. You block 2 damage from any source. And so on and so forth. And actually, if you are playing one of the cooperative scenarios, you can actually play certain cards on other players in order to help them out, because this is a collaborative game. You may instead choose to use your regroup in order to heal hull combat damage. If you took a lot of damage, you can heal 4 hull damage. You might also choose to take exploration or combat tokens, which are those 2 tokens there next to this other stack of activation tokens. Those are going to be used for certain special abilities that require you to use them, but also to help you build star bases. And since I mentioned that, let's just go ahead and roll right into the last phase of the game, which is Expand. This is actually your opportunity to build star bases. In order to build a star base, you're going to need to have 6 exploration tokens and 6 combat tokens. And when you choose to build one of those, you put it into a sector, and a few different things are going to happen. First off, that sector is considered safe for the purposes of encounter cards. Raiders can't spawn there. You don't have to worry about them. And also, any Armada ships that are on that space or adjacent to it are going to get an extra die to roll as well when they have to make tests and combat checks and such. So it can be very, very important, especially in a cooperative scenario, to have some of those star bases built. And that is essentially the core of the gameplay and a lot of the things that you can expect. It's not everything. There are quite a few things going on in the game. Remember that you play this in scenarios, so in this particular one you have to fix the jump gate by bringing back XPM and surviving. If you don't get it built by 10 rounds, then you actually fail the game. Hence is the reason that this is a cooperative game, because it can be very difficult and you all have to work together. And these things can also change depending on the number of players. But that is essentially Centauri Saga. You and the other players are trying to get your armadas to build up your empires and protect your corner of the galaxy. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Well, first and foremost, you have to appreciate what Centauri Saga is accomplishing here, because while there are many spacefaring games and a lot of 4X games, very few of them put a twist on the genre the same way that Centauri Saga does. Namely, in the sense of, if you were playing in that scenario, cooperating with the other players and actually having it work and be functional within the context of the game. It makes sense thematically, and it makes sense with the mechanisms of the game. You're all helping each other, you're exploring, you're trying to complete these different tasks, whether it's defeating raiders or completing a jump gate or both. You have to survive all these different events that come out that can affect everybody, as well as trying to hope that those events don't come out. Amongst other ways that they come out, you want to make sure that you do well in these encounters, so you're encouraged to support each other. You can support each other just by going to a sector and trying to help out with raiders that player is trying to destroy, but you might also try to use your action cards on the other players as well. So it definitely has a ton of cooperation in it. Not necessarily, there are some cooperative games that don't necessarily have players fully cooperating with each other. There's like an alpha gamer who's just kind of leading everybody, but this game definitely relies on you being cooperative with each other. And of course, it has that spacefaring theme, which is just cool. It's also interesting how you're moving around potentially one ship token on the board, but it represents an entire armada of ships, and there's all these different upgrades, and you can switch out different power-ups and ships and units, and just give yourself a different feel than the other players. Customize yourself to the way that you want to be customized, which it gives you a great feeling. And also, together with the action cards, it always feels like you're doing something different and distinct than the other players, while at the same time you are helping them. And the game has a very interesting ramp-up of difficulty, and the enemies are going to get tougher, and you have to fight bosses. But at the same time, you can be building these star bases, and this is kind of going hand in hand with the 4X elements of the game, in the sense that you're exploring. I'm always forgetting all 4 of the X's, so you'll have to excuse me. But in the sense that you are exploring, you're exterminating the other raiders, and you're doing all these different things and trying to get goods, and you're spending goods. It's like there's merchant type aspects to the game where you're spending this astardium, these precious commodities, in order to power yourself up at the same time. It's just very interesting how all of these different elements come together. And more than anything, it's a unique package. It's something that I haven't seen in not only other 4X games, but other cooperative games as well. Definitely something that if you were just to look at it and say, wow, Centauri Saga, it looks like that's probably like some sort of big combat game, like ships on a map type game. Only part of it is. For the most part, it is something altogether different and unique. And you would be remiss if you did not at least check it out. Go to the official Kickstarter project page and find out if this is going to be a game that is right for you. Because I think a lot of people who are into science fiction themes, people who like 4X games, but who want something a little bit simpler, something that can be played in a shorter amount of time, something that can be taught a little bit easier, so that they can enjoy them with a wider scope of people who are not willing to sit down for a 12-hour 4X game. Those are the type of people who are going to be drawn into this game. And when you go to the official Kickstarter project page, you can find out even more information, learn more about what's on the horizon for this game with any potential stretch goals and things like that. And hopefully you will consider backing Centauri Saga from Vesuvius Media. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.